Hey everybody, it's Michael Angelo Caruso. I am with Amy Satterfield today. Hi Amy.
Hi.
We're talking today about something that most people hear a lot about but don't know a lot about, and it's yoga. And you have a yoga studio. It's a very popular place in Troy, Michigan, correct?
Yes, we're in Troy, Michigan. Explore Yoga.
Explore Yoga, very good. And where can people find it online, Amy?
We are at exploreyogatroy.com.
Okay, very good. How long have you had a studio?
The studio is in its fifth year right now, so we opened in 2014.
All right, congratulations. That's great. And what got you into yoga personally? Everybody's got their own story about this. They either influenced by a friend or got tired of being stressed all the time. But when you open a studio, you really dedicate yourself to the practice, yeah?
Yeah, for sure. I kind of dabbled in yoga a little bit over the years, but really I got pretty deep into the practice of yoga after I had my third child. And it was kind of yoga wasn't exactly what I was looking for. I was actually looking for a way to lose weight, and a way to exercise. And I found my way into a self-defense gym, which ironically enough is where I started teaching yoga. So I was kind of encouraged by the owners of the self-defense gym to teach at their gym, and kind of the rest is history.
So that's an interesting transition because self-defense is, I know a lot of it's built on nonviolence, but it is a fairly physical thing, and yoga seems to be such a Zen, peaceful thing.
Yeah.
But they are related, aren't they?
I don't know if they're related, but I would say, balance is everything. The type of self-defense that I practiced was called Krav Maga. So it's Israeli self-defense. And the whole motto behind that is so that one may walk in peace. So that kind of, ties into the whole yoga thing as well.
Yeah, well, I guess what I meant was self-defense is not about harming the other person. It's about defending yourself from harm.
Yeah.
And I don't know. We'll get into that in just a second. I want people to know why yoga is important, why they should think about taking better care of themselves, and in particular, the connection between yoga and body, yoga and physical health, which is an interesting place right now. And I don't know that AMA actually, the AMA is an interesting organization, the American Medical Association, because they don't officially recognize psychology, not just some of psychology, the entire field of psychology, because they're predicated on AMA is we have to wait for you to be in pain, and then we will give you a pill or a surgery to correct it, right? So they're not about preventive type stuff, which is really what yoga is, isn't it?
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
And so what's interesting to me is that this connection between the mind and the body, we think of yoga sometimes as a mental thing, but after having gone to many, many sessions now, I think it's very, very physical. Do you lean one way or the other, or are they kind of just co-joined in your mind?
Well, I think it's all connected. As we move the physical body, we tap into the mind as we really start to focus and hone our breath. That taps into our nervous system, and
Yeah.
kind of all connected. So, we don't walk out of a yoga class having only done a physical practice, but we might have walked out doing much more than that, tapping into our nervous system and our mind, and, maybe the soul as well.
Yeah, so some surprising things from my limited experience with yoga is and for those of you that never have attended a session, you have to go at least once. And by the way, once gives you only a flavor of what it's about. You don't actually get good at it for many, many sessions. That's why they call it a practice, right, Amy?
Yes.
And so what I was surprised at was I was actually sweating in yoga class, which just blew my mind, that I'm just standing there and I'm breaking out in a sweat. And you have to really do it to appreciate why this happens. But there's something that's physical about maintaining a pose. And that's a big part of yoga practice, is striking these poses, some of which are difficult in terms of being strenuous, but some are just about balance, right? And focus.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of times when people walk into a yoga class, they don't know what to expect the first time. And we do have people moving in ways that they're not used to moving. So I've even talked to really high level athletes before that are sweating and having a really hard time, even in their peak physical performance state. Yoga is still hard for them.
Yeah. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I mean hard in a healthy sense. It wasn't, I didn't walk out exhausted or anything. It was just a challenge. And one of the challenges is in our busy life, we're busy all the time. We're always multitasking. We're watching television while we text. We don't do anything with complete dedication anymore. A while back, a friend and I went to a high ropes course, and it was rejuvenating because I didn't find myself thinking about anything except the next element. Not that I could fall. It was delightful just to be focused on one thing for a change.
Absolutely.
And I find it's the same way in yoga. If you can clear your head, that you're just focused on one thing, and it's a remarkable feeling to do that anymore. You must get that type of feedback from your students.
Oh yeah, and not only in taking a yoga practice, but for me, it's a gift just to teach a yoga class. For me, I'm actually more present in that 1 hour that I'm teaching a yoga class, even than I am, if I'm taking one.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember that we're not really looking for the mind to be completely blank or to be vacant, but just for us to be present. And that movement, that mindful movement, combined with the breath is really what helps us get there or try to get there.
Yeah. How many different types of yoga are there?
Unknown. There are many different types of yoga. Yoga actually is it's still kind of emerging. You're going to see all different types of yoga emerging probably, I would imagine, maybe forever. But there's definitely some classical styles of yoga. We talked a little bit earlier, Ashtanga, Kundalini, and just more yoga that's been around for a really long time. And then we have some yoga combo classes that are coming up. I've seen yoga with weights. I've seen yoga. Really, there's all different kinds of yoga. At our studio, we keep it, like I mentioned before, just more anatomically based, movement based. But we do also have different styles within our studio as well. So where we were talking about yoga maybe being a physical challenge in some of the classes, we also have classes that are all about relaxation. Not about sweating, not about movement even. So guided meditation type classes. So there's really numerous types of yoga.
It's interesting to me that no matter what level people are in the classes that I attend, we almost always start the yoga session on our back, and we almost always end it the same way. There's a real rational and thoughtful warm up and then cool down to the activity, unlike a lot of other stuff we do where it's bam, I'm working, bam, I'm not working. Right. There's like this, even in sports, people are reluctant to stretch before or after, but in yoga, it's mindful. It's a much different way to approach things. I want to get back to anatomy, which you referenced a little bit earlier, and this connection between body and yoga. So there are two things going on in society right now that I notice. Actually, three. All right. The first one is this sedentary lifestyle that's just killer. Yeah. This idea of sitting around and not being active. So cholesterol just starts to pool in your, not pool maybe, but collect in your bloodstream. That's one lifestyle that we're seeing, sedentary. A lot of television, a lot of working at your desk. You're not moving around very much. The second one that I've noticed just in the last 10 or 20 years is this very physical, extreme sports. We just saw the movie Free Solo, which is about climbing without ropes, which just blows my mind. You've seen some of this extreme sports, right?
Yeah, of course.
Skateboarding and what else? Just crazy stuff. There's a new one now, you probably know the name of it, where people jump up against walls and do backflips and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Gosh, I can't remember the name of it now, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
It starts with a P, I think. I'll put it in the notes later. But it's crazy. It's like we're all Jason Bourne waiting to happen,
Right.
And then the third thing that I see happening is this more reasonable, at least for most of us, yoga practice. There's this mind over matter, this connection between body and mind. And the first time it hit me was I knew somebody that had gone in for heart surgery, and they did the rib spreader, and they crack your sternum to do the open heart surgery back in the day. And because they didn't let you stay in the hospital as long, you were up and walking the next day in no small measure of pain, by the way. So we had this sense like, the mind heals, which yogis have known for a long time. Mm-hmm. And then there's two types of healing. You can get in front of it and prevent stuff from happening. And then you can heal faster after something bad happens through thoughtful practice. Do you see both in your studio? Do you see people trying to prevent bad news and also get over something?
Yeah, so definitely we get a lot of people that come to yoga for pain, for much more than pain sometimes, anxiety, depression, all different things, but a lot of physical pain. Probably the number one thing people come in for is back pain. They've either been seeing a chiropractor or, just a doctor that's referring them to yoga to try something. And gosh, I haven't heard anybody walking out saying that it hasn't helped them at least a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so absolutely. And, as a side note, I used to teach yoga down at the Veterans Hospital in Detroit. And I worked in the pain clinic. And it was really interesting because there would be a lot of people that almost everyone would come in with PTSD, some level of depression, some level of anxiety, and all of them being on some amount of pills. And by the course of the 6 weeks that I got to see them, many were able to come off of a lot of those medications, a lot of them being pain medications. So there really is some truth to that, having seen it firsthand.
So sticking with the pills concept for a minute, we've got a serious opioid problem in the United States now where people are taking opioids to conquer pain.
Yeah.
They think it's an intractable problem. The only thing that could possibly help them is more medication, which of course is a one-way dead-end street. And then depression itself, with drugs like Prozac, these are people taking a pill because nothing else seems to work for them. Wearing bright colors, burning lavender candles at home at night, therapy, nothing's working for them. And so pain medication remains the go-to. And yet if the root of pain medication, and I'm not a pharmacist, is that it settles something in your, in the chemical release that allows depression to not be as oppressive. Mm-hmm. And you can find some sort of physical activity like getting together with a bunch of cool people that think something of themselves and want to make themselves better. That seems like a much better alternative for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Huh.
Yeah. I mean, really, and I don't want to make it sound quite so easy to get out of pain, but it can be as simple as learning to breathe in a different way, learning to posture yourself in a different way. As you mentioned, we're sedentary, pretty much everything that we do is in front of us. Our computers are in front of us, our phones are in front of us, our steering wheels are in front of us. Everything we do is kind of oriented forward. So even just to move the fluids and stimulate the body in a way that's not forward, twisting the spine and extending the spine and doing things can be potentially really helpful, not only for the physical body, but also just for the mind, get some movement in the nerves themselves. One of the most important things, or one of the really coolest things that I see, is how our breath impacts our nervous system.
What does?
How the breath impacts the nervous system. Yeah.
Tell me more.
Okay, so simply changing the way that you breathe. How we start every yoga practice really is with paying attention to our breath. And most people tend to breathe a little shallow, a little high up in the body. When we breathe that way, it makes us really anxious. And when you come into a yoga class, even within the first few minutes, we kind of teach you to breathe a little bit deeper into the belly, a little bit deeper into the lungs. And that really begins to soothe and nourish the nervous system, which, could potentially make you feel better.
For sure. So let's talk about breathing for a minute. And then when I get into body fluids and how they move around, this idea of stretching and, looking in different directions and stuff. When I was a kid in 5th grade, Mr. Lewis comes in with a bunch of musical instruments, and you get to choose what instrument you want to play. And for those of us that chose wind instruments, we very quickly got a lesson in breathing, which caught us by surprise because we had been breathing on our own for 13 or 14 years. But he started talking about using something called the diaphragm, which we had never heard of, to breathe deep from down below rather than shallow from the chest. I assume that's kind of what you're talking about when you talk about shallow breathing versus deeper breathing.
Right. So when people breathe shallow breaths, they're really using the accessory muscles of breath instead of the primary muscle of breathing, which is the diaphragm, which is what your teacher taught you.
Is the diaphragm, I guess I'm still not completely aware of what's happening. Diaphragm's I can't really show you, but it's kind of down here, isn't it?
Yep. So if you imagine the bottom of your rib cage,
Yeah.
The diaphragm is sort of this thin sheath-like muscle that nestles right up at the very bottom of the ribs.
Okay.
As you breathe in and your lungs expand, the diaphragm descends and it kind of distorts the internal organs, and so the belly rises. As
Yeah.
you exhale, the diaphragm nestles right back up in the ribs, helping the lungs to get rid of all of the air.
Right.
And that's the the really gentle flow and work of the of the diaphragm.
Right. So for those of you watching now, Amy can talk me through this a bit. So if I first of all, if I try that shallow, easy breathing that Amy's talking about, and I know this isn't how it works, Amy, but for our listeners and people watching, when I take an even shallow breath, I can feel the upper part of my chest move a bit, right?
Yeah.
Because air is coming into the cavity and bumping it out a bit. But if I do that shallow breath down below, I don't feel it move as much. Is that a physical demonstration of what's actually happening?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So you're using more accessory muscles of breath. So you're using the muscles that are in between the ribs. You're using, some of the upper shoulder and neck muscles there instead of concentrating on that diaphragm.
Yeah. So the opposite of that, guys, is that if you put your hand down here, and so my ribs end right here, if I put my hand down here and spread your fingers so you can actually feel the fascia, because you said it's a sheet-like muscle, right? Very thin.
The diaphragm is a pretty thin muscle, yeah, but it actually nestles up in the ribs. So imagine like
concave, like this,
like a parachute, and it goes all the way around.
Okay, very good. I guess I'm just trying to physically demonstrate it to everybody so they get a sense of what this is about. So then if you imagine drawing your breath from your stomach, which is technically impossible, guys, because your lungs are up here, right? Mm-hmm. And then fill up all the way up here like this, which is what Mr. Lewis used to teach us back in 5th grade. It's a flashback to this idea of this deep breathing. And the reason we did it playing wind instruments, I played the trumpet, is that you could play longer phrases, or you could play more loudly because there was more air moving. And the only way to get more air into the horn was to have it come from down below instead of, in my throat someplace.
Right.
So that's when I first started thinking about this deep breathing thing. And I, of course, have been thinking about it ever since, but not in the yoga sense. All right. Now, you mentioned body fluids, and I'm sure this is people's imaginations are going crazy. We're talking about lymph fluid. We're talking about blood in particular.
Yep.
True.
So, many of us have a really sedentary lifestyle where we don't actually, and, even joint fluids. So we don't move through the articulations of the joints like we should most days. Right. That's where yoga is really helpful, and really any movement is really helpful. You could go for a walk, and that would be extremely beneficial to somebody that does nothing but maybe sit and drive all day.
That's right. That's right. And which is why breaks are important.
Absolutely.
Like these people at work that, they're going to muscle through a 4-hour meeting because they're macho or, dedicated to work. Stupidest thing I ever heard. Because when you get up and you move, my dad used to call it oxygenating the blood. Mm-hmm. The blood starts to move through the system. This is the fluid motion that Amy's talking about. And oxygenated blood in the brain is a good thing. And your brain stops getting oxygen if you're sitting down for long periods of time. And when people die, if you're laying flat on your back, the blood actually pools in the bottom of this is gross, it pools in the bottom of your body. There's a name for this. And that's how they can tell that you haven't moved for a while. Mm-hmm. And if you don't think that's true when you're still alive, you're just not thinking clearly.
That's right.
And lymph fluid, talk a little bit about that, because that's like the magic. I don't know much about it myself, but that's what's moving too with yoga, yeah?
Sure, and I don't want to speak too much on that because I'm not really intimately informed about that, but
okay.
But that would definitely be something that we would want to move around as well. And the lymph nodes are really small, so you really do have to find many different ways to move the body to kind of get into the lymphatic system. Right.
And then finally, this idea of not looking forward all the time. So there's yoga movements like sitting down and then twisting behind, like using your right hand to get a bearing on the floor, right? And actually look behind you. There's another one I remember where we're looking down between our legs, stuff that you just don't normally do in the course of the day. Why is that so important in yoga?
Well, I think that we're designed, as human beings to move in every which way.
Yeah.
To be really healthy, we need to move the body in the way it was designed to move. And, our spine in particular can move in 6 directions. So, I think people move it in 1 most days. They fold forward. We're in this, flexed state from our hips to our torso. But we can also backward bend, which I'm sure most people don't do very often. We can laterally side bend, which most people probably don't do very often. And obviously we can have that rotational movement, that twisting of the spine as well. And when you don't do that for a really long time, the muscles start to get probably weak and tense. And then when you have to do it, like you might have to reach and grab something, that's when people get strains and injuries because the muscles are so tight and they haven't been moving.
For sure. Did you just take us through the 6 ways the spine can bend?
I think I did, yeah.
Left, right, down, back. That's the hard one.
Yeah, and side to side.
Side to side, yeah.
Rotational, yeah.
Yeah. And it's true, because when you're exercising, doing these more physical forms of exercise, they talk about the core, build the core. And then the core is built up of all these little muscles around, obliques and muscles around the sides of your body and stuff. And you're right. That's the one you twist when you're reaching for the the plug and unplug the light and you can't come out. You wrench your back on such a little thing like that. So this is what's interesting for me. Not everybody's able to do really strong, violent physical exercise. Extreme sports are not for everybody. But yoga is for almost anybody. Is that true? It's such an easy entry point. If you just have to get your butt to the studio or to online, we want them to come to your studio, but there's also online yoga. I mean, you could just watch. It's mimicry in its purest sense, isn't it?
Yeah, and we have people over the age of 80 that come to our studio and practice yoga, and they're not practicing, like I said, we have many different styles, so they're not practicing the hot vinyasa, the quicker pace classes. We find them more in a gentle yoga class or a yin yoga class. But as young as 7 to as old as 82, I believe, is what we have right now. And it's really interesting because they can all be in the same exact class.
I've been in that class, and most of the people are women, which is another thing that, like, women are so cool because they know they need to take care of themselves, and they're not above. Men sometimes feel they're above this because it's not violent, it's not hitting something, which is what most sport is made of. One thing that always got me in yoga, and we're wrapping up here with Amy Satterfield, everybody, from Explore Yoga in Troy. And we're doing an event together, everybody, January 30th. Well, there'll be more about that in the notes down below, also a registration link. And I'm looking forward to that, Amy. But this idea of 80-year-old woman over here and a 7-year-old boy over here, and here I am. And some of us have been to the class 80 times, some of us have been to the class once. And the yoga instructor always says, go at your own pace and do whatever you can, which bothers me because I'm like, no, this is supposed to be a class. We're all supposed to be doing the same thing. But that's me. That's my old school thinking, right?
That's your ego. Yeah. That's the, talk about that a lot in yoga. No, I mean, I think what the teacher means is, modify for what you should be doing today. And, maybe the 80-year-old can do more than, the 40-year-old or even the 7-year-old. I have, a 75-year-old woman that outplanks the young men that come in class, and it's really cool to see. So,
yeah.
You do what's right for you on that day. And I think it's just about listening to your body and really tuning into knowing what's needed at any moment.
What some of the teachers say is they have like this default pose that you can go to, like table pose or something, which is on all fours, everybody. And then you wait there until that difficult move is over, until the blood returns to your brain. In my case.
And no judgment about that. So, always take breaks when you need them.
Yeah. What's up with all these poses, man? They're all named after animals. The cat, cow, pigeon.
Yeah. Well, I guess it goes just kind of with how they look in the body. I don't know where the English names, who correlated the English names for these poses, but most of them are direct translations from the Sanskrit names. But it's just what the body looks like in the pose.
Yeah, and they're fun. I mean, downward facing dog. There's another animal name. Funny story before we go. the guy that I like here in town, he's really close to us, and we go early in the morning. It's dark. We've been to your studio too, but this is so easy for us in the morning. And he likes to be zen and earthy when he talks to us. So it's always about reaching for the sky, not the ceiling, but the sky, right? Or toward the earth. But whenever he gestures this way, it's toward the parking lot, which I get a big, which now I start laughing every time everybody looks at me like, "What's up with you, pal?" You are fantastic. You're a role model for so many of us because you take care of yourself, man. And a lot of us need to do a better job at that. We could lead not only longer lives, but better quality lives by being a bit more careful about this connection between mind and body and spirit in the case of yoga. And I'm just so glad that you're teaching so many people how to do this.
Thank you. Me too.
Give us the website again for Troy, Michigan. This is in Southeast Michigan, everybody. Explore Yoga is where?
We're on the corner of Square Lake and Rochester Road in Troy. Yeah, you can visit us on our website, Explore Yoga Troy. You could also go to our Facebook page where we post a lot of things. Of course, we're on Instagram and all of that good stuff as well. It's just under Explore Yoga Studio.
Great. Yeah. Amy Satterfield, everybody. She's great. Come see us, and we're going to do a little panel discussion on mind, body, spirit on January 30th in Troy. And again, the registration link will be down below in the show notes. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, Michael.